It was 7:42 a.m. on August 17, 1943. Technical Sergeant James McKenna stood on the flight line of Doadoura Airfield, New Guinea. He watched Lieutenant Robert Hayes climb into the cockpit of a P-38 Lightning. James was the only person on that airfield who knew that the aircraft was carrying an unauthorized modification. It consisted of 6 inches of salvaged piano wire, bent by hand in the dark at 1 in the morning. He had stuffed it inside the left boom, where no inspector would think to look. James had no engineering degree and no permission from his commanding officer, but what he had was 8 months of watching good pilots climb into perfectly maintained aircraft and not come back. That, he had been told officially and in writing, was not his problem to solve. Hayes was flying into 18 Japanese Zero fighters. The modification either worked or it didn't. If it didn't, McKenna would spend the rest of the war trying to live with that. What happens in the next few minutes will completely change the air war in the Pacific. All because of one mechanic. James McKenna was born in 1918 in Long Beach, California. He was not a pilot and never wanted to be one. By his own account, he never had the stomach for it. What he had instead was an instinct for mechanical systems that bordered on obsessiveness. Simply put, James was the kind of man who, before the war, could diagnose an engine problem by listening to it through a closed hood. He had worked in automotive repair through his late teens and early 20s. Because of that, he had developed a feel for tolerances, tensions, and the way small imperfections compound into large failures. He was 24 when he arrived in New Guinea as a P-38 crew chief. The P-38 Lightning was an incredible aircraft by almost any measure. It had twin engines and was exceptionally capable at high altitude. But in a turning fight, it was getting American pilots killed at a rate that should have triggered an emergency engineering review. The problem was the Zero. The Mitsubishi A6M could execute a full horizontal turn in roughly half the time a P-38 needed. Japanese pilots had spent 2 years building tactics around that advantage. They would bait American pilots into turning engagements. They would cut inside their turning radius, get on their tail, and shoot. The 5th Air Force had lost 37 P-38s in the 6 weeks prior to August 17th. The official doctrine response was to tell pilots not to turn with Zeros. Instead, they were told to use speed. They were told to use altitude. They were told to dive in and climb out. They were told never to get caught maneuvering. The doctrine was correct in theory, but in combat, it kept failing. The first pilot James lost to a Zero was Lieutenant David Chen on July 9, 1943. McKenna had worked on Chen's aircraft every morning for 3 weeks. They talked about California. Chen was from Sacramento. James was from Long Beach. Both had grease under their fingernails before the war. On July 9th, Chen took off at 6:15. He came back 2 hours later with 3 bullet holes grouped tightly in his left boom. A Zero had gotten inside his turn so cleanly it had seemed almost deliberate. Chen told James the airplane had felt slow to respond. It was like there was a pause between moving the stick and the aircraft actually rolling. It was just long enough for the Zero pilot to calculate his lead perfectly. Only his wingman had kept him alive. Chen never flew from Doadoura again. 3 weeks later, James heard he had been killed over Rabaul. He had been caught in a turning fight he could not escape. By mid-August, James had watched 17 pilots leave Doadoura and not return. He decided that if the engineering command was not going to fix the problem, he was going to fix it himself. On the evening of August 16th, Lieutenant Robert Hayes found James working on his assigned P-38. He asked him directly if there was anything at all, that could make the airplane roll faster. He said he did not care whether it was regulation. James told him to come back in the morning. After 11 p.m., when the maintenance hangar had emptied and the only sounds were generators and insects against the overhead lights, James pulled the inspection panel off Hayes' left boom. He grabbed the aileron cable with both hands. He felt the slack immediately. Then he remembered the piano wire. It had come from a P-38 that had ground looped 2 weeks earlier and been stripped for salvage. James had pulled a 6-inch section of high-tensile wire from the rudder trim system without quite knowing why he was keeping it. Now he knew why. Working on the hangar floor, he bent the wire into a Z shape with a pair of pliers. His hand slipped twice. The wire cut his thumb on the second try. He wiped the blood on his coveralls and kept going. The Z shape would take up the slack in the cable. It would make the control surface respond the instant the stick moved. At one point, he dropped a clevis pin in the dark. He spent 5 minutes feeling around to find it. If the engineering officer walked in, it was a court-martial. When the clevis pin finally seated, he pulled the cable. There was no slack. The control surface moved immediately. At 7:42 a.m. on August 17th, Hayes took off. He joined a formation of 16 other P-38s heading northwest toward Japanese airspace. McKenna stood on the flight line and watched until they disappeared. The engagement started at 8:14 a.m. Hayes's flight of 4 intercepted 9 Zeros at 13,000 feet over the Huon Gulf. The morning sun was at their backs. Hayes dove from altitude. He built to 380 miles per hour. He pressed the trigger close enough to see the rising sun painted on the fuselage. The Zero snap-rolled and dove. Hayes rolled to follow. That was when he felt it. The airplane responded instantly. He had never felt a P-38 move like that. 3 seconds of fire walked rounds from tail to cockpit. The Zero's engine exploded. It fell toward the jungle, trailing black smoke. His wingman called out 3 Zeros diving from above. They had watched Hayes shoot down one of their own. Hayes shoved the throttles forward and started to climb. They were too fast in the dive. He had seconds before they were on him. Every instinct told him to follow the rules and keep running. Instead, he rolled hard left and pulled. The P-38 snapped through the turn like a different airplane. The nose came through the horizon. The lead Zero was right there. It was badly positioned. It had expected the American to take longer to reverse. Hayes pulled lead and fired. He hit the Zero in the left wing root. The wing folded. The aircraft tumbled away. That was 2 kills in under 30 seconds. By the end of the entire engagement, Hayes had made 3 kills. It had all happened in 7 minutes. Hayes landed at Doadoura at 9:03 a.m. with 3 confirmed kills. His hands were shaking when he climbed out of the cockpit. His flight suit was soaked through. He walked straight to James and said 2 words. It worked. After these events, the change in the kill ratio was almost impossible to ignore.